Hello, this is Dr. Vicente. I'm going to talk about critical reflection for this short webinar for our EDUC 1050 course. When we see the phrase critical reflection, it should bring us back to history, ancient Greek history to be more specific. And we need to remember Socrates, one of the greatest philosophers of all time who revolutionized learning through his Socratic method. His Socratic method really hinged on dialogue. He would question his learners in a rigorous technique called elenchus, the objective of which was to really provoke intellectual curiosity so that individuals will achieve the truth in a permanent state of critical thinking. So critical reflection really finds its roots thousands of years ago through Socrates. When we take a look at the modern era, we need to remember John Dewey, another philosopher, this time from North America, who wrote about reflective thinking. In his classic book, which is entitled How We Think, written in 1910, he describes reflective thinking, and reading the quotation, as a short activity which means judgment is suspended during further inquiry. Moreover, he says that the suspense is likely to be somewhat painful. In John Dewey's mind, reflective thinking is an uncomfortable situation because you find yourself debating whether or not what is confronting you is certain or whether it is doubtful. John Dewey actually conceived of 5 steps in reflection, and this is again found in his book How We Think. We need to recall that John Dewey is the founder of the philosophical movement called pragmatism. Pragmatism essentially means that experience is more important over principles, and that what is really more important is that something, an idea, is useful. Let's take a look at his 5 steps in reflection. First, he says there needs to be a felt difficulty, a confusion, doubt. Second, locating and defining what this doubt is. Third, suggesting possible solutions. Fourth, development by reasoning of possible solutions to the problem, issue. And finally, further observation and experiment leading to the acceptance or rejection of that initial difficult notion that we are confronted with. So that is John Dewey's 5 steps in reflection, something that he wrote in 1910. Several decades later, we are confronted by this particular intellectual, Paulo Freire, a Brazilian individual who spent many years as a teacher and who revolutionized the way that we take a look at reflection. He was the one who is attributed to really looking at critical reflection. One of the ideas that he talks about is praxis. And praxis is defined as reflection and action upon the world in order to transform it. So let's take a look back. Socrates talks about dialogue. Dewey talks about doubt and finding certainty in the doubt. Paulo Freire talks about reflection and action upon the world in order to transform it. So Freire's idea of critical reflection is not armchair thinking about ideas, but actually undertaking action. His idea of praxis basically argues that it is not enough for people to sort of come together in dialogue. Dialogue is not enough. This dialogue needs to be converted into reflection and action. His book, Pedagogy of the Oppressed, is a landmark study in education. He was imprisoned because of his ideas, but later on became a really influential individual in the ideas of pedagogy, particularly in developing worlds. In this quotation, again from his landmark book, Pedagogy of the Oppressed, Paulo Freire again repeats the idea that critical reflection is also action. This actually can be born, we could say that these ideas are born out of the experiences he had when he was still a student. His family encountered poverty, and he actually was delayed by 4 levels when he was studying. And he was saying that he really could not think because he was hungry. Because of that, his ideas revolutionized the idea of pedagogy of the oppressed. There are several other thinkers that you should be familiar with. One is Donald Shawn. You are familiar with this already because I usually refer to Donald Shawn's reflection in action, and critical reflective practitioner during every lecture that we have at the latter part of every lecture. So Donald Shawn talks about critical reflective practitioners, which is our goal, for everyone to become critical reflective practitioners. Donald Shawn and Chris Argyris also talked about learning, organizational learning, in this particular book that you're seeing in the slide. Their ideas are really anchored in business, but they have been used in education. They talk about single loop learning and a deeper way of learning, which they refer to as double loop and even more complex loops of learning. If you want to take a look at critical reflection applied in education, you can then also be familiar, or should be familiar, with the work of Jack Mezirow, who talks about transformative learning. Jack Mezirow also borrows ideas from critical reflection and anchoring this firmly in looking at dimensions of adult learning. So these intellectuals you could also be exposed by reading would be Donald Shawn, Chris Argyris, and Jack Mezirow. For this particular webinar, we ask you to take a look at a particular short article in which a researcher looks at how students learn critical reflection through the practice of blogging. We really hope that you engage with this article and find out what discoveries the researcher was able to make in relation to this subject. Thank you.